Joining me now is NBC News national security correspondent Dan DeLuce as we continue to cover these strikes by U.S. forces in Iraq. What happens next, Dan? What are you hearing?
Well, of course, they're not telegraphing exactly what comes next, but I think it's fair to assume that now that we've seen dozens of strikes in Iraq and Syria against these Iranian-backed militias, that at some point soon the U.S. will turn its focus on the Houthi forces in Yemen that have created such a headache in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden for commercial cargo ships, firing missiles and drones at those commercial ships, with the U.S. Navy there trying to fend off those drone attacks and those missile attacks. Now, so what we could see is a real ramp up in strikes against those Houthis forces that are firing those drones and missiles in Yemen. And of course, they are also backed, armed, and financed by Iran. The other thing I think we're going to have to look for is what will be the response of these militia groups that have just been targeted by this pretty major operation today on the ground. Will they go to ground? Will they kind of conceal themselves? Will they come out and fight and try to retaliate and escalate further? What will Iran's reaction be? I think these are all questions, because the dilemma, of course, Joy, as we've been talking about on the show tonight, is, can the U.S. deter Iran with this kind of operation? Or does this end up being something where Iran then escalates, and we are up this ladder of escalation, and we might end up in a war that maybe neither side wants, a kind of Guns of August World War I scenario? Too soon to say, but I think we're going to see more airstrikes, definitely, probably Tomahawk missiles at some point fired from ships there in the Persian Gulf.
NBC's Dan DeLuce, thank you. Valuable information. Thank you very much. Let's bring in former Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes. Okay, Ben, I love explainers. So can we put the map back up? As we love seeing you, but I want to also get this map up one more time, because I think for people to sort of understand what's going on and look at this map, you have this situation that begins with Hamas attacking Israel, Israel then going to war in Gaza. And then the reaction of that ends up being against U.S. and European ships in the Red Sea, which you can see right stripped down the middle next to Saudi Arabia, between Saudi Arabia and Egypt. So shipping that really is European, Israeli, and American shipping. And now attacks inside of Jordan, you can see it right up there, that ends up injuring some 50-odd American troops and killing 3. And so just to have people sort of understand why it is that the U.S. winds up in this position, because the U.S. is seen as the backer of Israel, right? So whatever they do, people attribute it in some sense to us. And then Iran is the backer of all these little groups, 2 of them called Hezbollah, Kataib Hezbollah, and a different Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. Have I explained that correctly? That this is sort of the war, both are seen as proxies, right? Israel is viewed in the region as, in a sense, our proxy, and then Iran has these proxies, and they're directing them, maybe not directing them, but that's sort of how it looks.
Yeah, Joy, you're right. And to just build off of this a little bit, because it gets complicated,
Yes.
But the October 7th, you have Hamas launch this brutal terrorist assault into Israel. And then you have this overwhelming Israeli military response in Gaza, which precipitates a humanitarian disaster. All of these groups are a bit different, right? You've got Hezbollah in Lebanon. You've got these militias that are backed by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in Iraq and Syria. You've got the Houthis in Yemen. What they all share in common, in addition to the fact that they draw some support from Iran, is that they all see themselves as at the vanguard of standing up to Israel and standing up to the United States and trying to push the United States and its military presence out of this region. So it's in the kind of DNA of these groups. When you have a war like what's happening in Gaza, it's in their DNA to start activating themselves. And so Hezbollah in Lebanon starts firing some rockets into northern Israel, starts getting into tit for tat with Israel and Lebanon. Then these groups in Iraq and Syria, these militias, they've been fighting, some of these dating back to the U.S. occupation of Iraq. They started to attack U.S. forces way back in the Bush years when we were in Iraq. They've been operating ever since. When there was a Syrian civil war, some of these groups were fighting on the side of the Assad regime against the Free Syrian Army and some of the groups backed by the United States. The Houthis have been in a war for years with a Saudi-led coalition that was seeking to dislodge the Houthis, and the Houthis proved quite resilient through that. The point is, all these groups, what they share in common is that they want to stand up to the United States. They want to be a part of fighting back against Israel and what they're doing. They want to be chaos agents. They want to show that there's a cost that the world is going to have to pay, and that is the tax on shipping, so long as the bombardment of Gaza goes on. Iran is obviously an important actor here. Now, I think what is complicated is I don't think Iran is sitting there and directing them, hey, hit this base in Jordan on this day or launch this attack on the shipping in the Red Sea. That's not really how it works. It's not like a straight command and control type operation. They do provide weapons and money and other things to them. And so what the U.S. is doing now is they're essentially targeting this whole network of groups. They're not targeting inside of Iran. They're also not targeting Hezbollah in Lebanon, because Hezbollah is the biggest and most sophisticated of these organizations. And Hezbollah has been cautious, frankly, to not target the U.S. either. We're going after the groups in the middle here in Syria and Iraq, as well as in Yemen.
Okay, so this is great. And now I want to do two more. Okay, let me do the next one being the question for a lot of people, I think. We're now bombing Iraq. We were, obviously, we occupied Iraq. We had a war against Iraq that, a lot of people questioned during the Bush administration. But Iraq used to be a country that was run by a Sunni. They thought it was an apostate, but a Sunni, right? Saddam Hussein. But it is a majority Shiite country. Iran is the biggest Shiite. These are the sort of different branches of Islam. But the biggest group on earth of Muslims are Sunni. But there you have Iran, who are Shiite. Hezbollah, I believe, is also a Shiite militia group. What about Hamas and Kataib Hezbollah? Is there that much of are they also Shiite groups? Is there any other link between them, the Houthis, et cetera, just on that basis?
Well, it's interesting that you point this out. It's an important point, Joy. The removal of Saddam Hussein was a massive gift to Iran, because all of a sudden you were going to have a Shiite-led government, by and large, in Baghdad, in Iraq. And so a lot of these militias inside of Iraq, absolutely, they are Shiite militias that have been fighting against the U.S. presence and that have been, associated and sometimes with aspects or elements of the Iraqi government, which makes things very complicated. Hamas, no. Hamas is a Sunni organization. What they share is opposition to Israel. And as Iran kind of established itself as the patron of different groups that stand up to Israel, they had this relationship with Hamas. It got a little complicated during the Syrian civil war because Hamas was not necessarily on the Iranian side in that one here. Right. The reason that what you said is really important, though, Joy, is people have to understand this is what's so dangerous. We're walking into multiple regional conflicts and multiple wars, in a sense, because there's the war that's currently taking place between Israel and Hamas and these other groups. Then there's this sectarian tension, the Sunni-Shia divide in the region. The reason that a lot of U.S. partners that are Sunni majority, like the Saudis or the Emiratis, don't get along with Iran, one of the reasons why is this sectarian divide. And so we're stirring there's a lot of hornets' nests that are being kicked up here since October 7th. And we're kind of now right in the middle of the swarm of hornets, if you will.
And I want to very quickly ask you if you can answer these super quick, because we're getting close to a commercial break. So there is the NBC News reporting that when Biden met privately with his national security aides this week, he raised the question to people briefed with the discussion, said, if he ordered military action to avenge the deaths of these 3 U.S. soldiers in Jordan, would that jeopardize the delicate talks over the release of American hostages in Gaza? When aides eased such concerns, he decided he would proceed with military measures. Because amidst all of this, Ben, there is the reporting that the Biden administration is attempting to do this 3-card Monte, this multi-box, make it all work regional plan that could involve recognizing the Palestinian state, that could involve Saudi Arabia normalizing with Israel, and that could involve the release of all the hostages and a cessation of violence in Gaza. All that's happening at the same time that these proxy groups are hitting U.S. troops and killing 3 U.S. troops. Where does all that then go?
I think it gets harder, Joy. And look, Qatar has been in the Middle East, not Iran, in terms of dealing with Hamas in these negotiations. But the reality is it's a war. And the more you're kicking things up and the more it's escalating, they're going to have people in Iran that are not going to want Hamas necessarily to cooperate with a U.S.-led kind of initiative. You're going to have potential violence from Hezbollah and Lebanon against Israel, which might make Israel feel less inclined to stop its military operations. It just makes it harder if there's this level of violence to do things diplomatically. And I hope that we prioritize diplomacy here at some point.
It's always great to talk with somebody who knows their stuff, because I think this stuff gets really complicated and there's so many pieces and so many different groups to remember who they are and what they want. Ben Rhodes, it is so great to have you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.